You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, we hear from the North Sea oil and gas workers forced to pay for training they can't afford or risk losing work as the UK moves away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Political point scoring or a way to protect a World Heritage Site? The row over classing the Great Barrier Reef as in danger heats up. And how your home could become a mini power station to help the UK reach its climate targets. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes that are happening to our world right now and we meet those coming up with the solutions. Well, as countries around the world attempt to reduce emissions from fossil fuels, the energy sector needs to undergo a huge transformation, with oil and gas making way for renewables. The North Sea transition deal, agreed by the government in March, aims to help workers in those sectors retrain and move into clean energy. But that is not necessarily happening. A survey of more than 600 North Sea oil and gas workers found that workers themselves are having to pay nearly £2,000 a year in training costs. Nearly two-thirds said that in the past 2 years, their employer contributed nothing financially to their retraining, and nearly three-quarters of those surveyed are contractors without guaranteed employment opportunities. And 94% said that they would support a solution in the form of an offshore passport, which would effectively licence all accredited workers to work offshore in any sector. Our climate correspondent Lisa Holland reports now from Aberdeen.
When the weather's good, there's a regular flow of helicopters ferrying oil and gas workers from Aberdeen Airport to rigs across the North Sea. At a nearby pub, the relief of getting back to shore is clear. But change the subject to people's futures and finding green jobs, and nobody wants to speak openly for fear of being blacklisted within the industry.
They are really, really angry. Everyone is really angry in the oil field at the minute.
This man has worked in oil and gas for 18 years.
When I started, it was good times, but I know a lot of people who've lost their jobs.
How much help do you feel is being given to people in the oil and gas industry to find a new job?
I haven't personally seen any help like that, and nobody I've ever spoken to in my time offshore has ever said they're getting help.
That uncertainty is felt across Aberdeen, a city built around the oil boom of the 70s. After 42 years in oil and gas, Norman is close to retirement and for that reason agreed to show his identity. He says he never imagined such uncertainty.
I want to finish my working career working. I don't want to finish like this. This is not good for anyone. But for a young guy in his 30s, I would say it would be pretty devastating.
In the harbour, oil and gas supply ships await instructions. Wind farms at sea point to a future of renewables, which nobody quite knows when and how will overtake the city's past. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Aberdeen.
Well, let's bring in Deidre Mickey now, Chief Executive of Oil and Gas UK. Deidre, good to talk to you. You represent an industry that's effectively in managed decline, and the workers we were hearing from there clearly don't have any confidence that anyone's looking out for them.
Yeah, good afternoon, Sam. I think it's a really interesting report that Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth put out today, because, and welcome it because it acknowledges the role that this sector and the workforce have to play in delivering a successful energy transition. And I think the thing that didn't come out of your report was how much change is going on in the sector. You know, many of our companies are already into all the other energies like hydrogen, carbon capture and storage and renewables, as well as oil and gas. And it's really important that they do move into all these sectors, because we are going to need oil and gas for years to come. And so the skills and the expertise that we have today in our sector will be absolutely crucial to these emerging energy sectors going forward.
And Deidre, how would this offshore passport work?
So one of the things that the report speaks to is removing the barriers so that people can move seamlessly between the different sectors. And that's something, absolutely support that principle, whether it's a passport or whether it's another means of aligning in terms of different standards and approaches. That's something that we need to work on. But the principle is absolutely right, that we should be reducing as many barriers as we can so that people can work in oil and gas, they can move into hydrogen, they can move into offshore wind, and that they can do that relatively seamlessly and relatively easily.
Deidre, Mickey, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, in today's other climate news, the UK's Sustainable Aviation Alliance has set new CO2 targets in a bid to reach net zero by 2050. Airlines, airports and other service providers have promised to reduce or indeed offset the sector's net emissions by 15% by 2030 and by 40% in 2040. However, those targets will have to be met by offsetting schemes and technology, which is not yet fully commercialised. Smart traffic lights, which tell motorists how long is left until they change to red, could be introduced in England to reduce CO2 emissions. A trial of the new technology found vehicle emissions were cut by more than a quarter as it minimised the number of unnecessary stops. It also led to a 17% reduction in nitrogen oxide levels from engines, which is linked to poor air quality. Gabon has become the first country in Africa to be rewarded for lowering its CO2 emissions. The UN's Central African Forest Initiative has paid the country $17 million for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in 2016 and 2017. Gabon says the money will be invested into low-carbon strategies, which can help reduce CO2 levels and protect biodiversity. And the Duchess of Cambridge has visited the Natural History Museum to hear about its Urban Nature project. The project aims to help communities across the UK to understand the importance of nature and find practical solutions to protect our planet's future. Well, during her visit, the Duchess joined local school children in the museum's wildlife garden and took part in activities including spider making and storytelling. Now, the Great Barrier Reef is one of the world's natural wonders, and its coral reefs play a crucial role in our environment. But now the UN's cultural body, UNESCO, wants it added to a list of endangered World Heritage Sites due to the impact of climate change. Australia has reacted angrily to the recommendation after it has spent years trying to keep the reef off that list, and its government says it will oppose the plan. Here's everything you need to know about the row.
This decision was flawed. Clearly there were politics behind it. Clearly those politics have subverted a proper process. I will stand up in any community, and I do, and say that we have the best managed reef in the world.
The values are definitely in danger. So from that perspective, yes, the World Heritage property should be listed in danger. It's not a permanent listing, and many properties have come off the in danger list once they can show that they have addressed the concerns that have been raised by the committee.
Now, big changes are going to be needed to our homes if the UK is to reach its target of net zero emissions by 2050, according to a new report published by Good Energy. Well, it found that in the next 30 years, £13.5 billion homes are going to need to have rooftop solar panels. More than 80% of heating will need to be electrified. That's rather than using natural gas. And homes should have battery walls to allow residents to store and use renewable energy when they need it. And driverless electric vehicles will need to become the norm, using technology to send power back to the grid in times of high demand. Well, joining me now is Juliette Davenport, founder of Good Energy. Juliette, good to talk to you. It's clear, isn't it, that households need to do their bit, but even most new builds don't have any of those elements yet.
Completely. And what the report lays out is that we've investigated looking at taking renewables out to the nation and what else do you need? And what is clear is the housing stock in the UK really lags behind the investments that we've seen in other European countries. So it's under-insulated. It doesn't, we don't really consider it as part of our energy infrastructure, whereas actually we could turn it into a benefit where we could see consumers generating their own power and being an active part of the power network by sending power back, as you said, from either their electric vehicle or storage in their own homes.
Juliette, when we look at our power mix, that percentage that comes from renewables needs to be much, much higher, doesn't it? What kind of infrastructure do we need in place to support that change?
So I think you touched on earlier on offshore wind is going to be a really important part of this mix. So making sure that we've got an industry, the skills and technology to be able to deliver offshore wind and the power systems to be able to bring that in from offshore. But we're also going to see from our analysis, we see some larger scale solar going in. So again, we're going to need the capability of taking power, delivering power locally. We're going to need to see geothermal. So geothermal is a technology is not much used, but actually we've got abundant sources in the UK and we're already beginning to see places like the Eden Centre explore for geothermal. And tidal is going to be a really important technology, something that as an island we have a lot more than most other countries do.
Oh, it's so interesting talking to you. Juliette Davenport, thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
Well, that is all for today. Coming up on tomorrow's show, the story of Britain's acid tar lagoons polluting local land with toxic liquid. You can see that at the same time here on Sky News. Hope to see you then.